If you haven't heard already, Scottie Scheffler has just been replaced by Rory McIlroy as the world's #1 in golf. This is the 9th time that the player has taken this spot in his career, coming right after his amazing finish at the CJ Cup. Scheffler was on top for a long time though. We'll look at this and see which other golfers dominated golf for the longest time. First up, how long was Scottie the world #1? The former world #1 was on top for a long time. Scheffler held the spot for a whopping 30 weeks, from the 28th of March to the 23rd of October. Even though this is a very long time, it's barely a portion of the longest time someone ever held the spot. Tiger Woods was once the world #1 for over 280 weeks. That's a very, very long time. Considering that he is one of the best golfers in the world right now, we can probably expect him to be back on top in a few weeks. If he doesn't get there immediately, you can probably expect him to challenge Rory McIlroy for it soon. Next up, let's learn more about Rory taking the spot.
Pretty good. Oh, very good.
From what we're hearing from CBS Sports, he was feeling a lot of pressure right before he was named the top golfer in the world. He was definitely expecting it, and while he was happy about that, he said he was a bit worried about what lies ahead for him. The player said that the cool thing about getting to be the world #1 is that it feels great in the moment, but there's a dark side to it. The bad thing about it is that you almost have to work harder to stay there because the competition gets tougher immediately. He also added that when you're striving towards something, it's not exactly easier to get there, but when you do get there, the real hard work begins because you have to stay there. It makes a lot of sense. Now, what does becoming the world's best golfer involve?
In this one. Okay. That's how you play 16. McIlroy.
The week before he became the world #1, McIlroy talked about the journey of getting there. He said the whole process of getting to be the #1 golfer in the world kind of illustrates that you can have your runs and you can stay there, but the coolest part of it all is the journey getting to the top. He even compared it to a heavyweight boxer, how they lose a world title and have to go through a whole journey to get it back. He even added that this whole thing, the journey, is the cool part of the whole thing, and he really enjoys every part of it, the ups and downs. Just like Rory McIlroy had some great dominating moments at the top of the world golf rankings, Scheffler will do the same. It's going to be a constant battle between the two golfers, and we can't wait to see it unfold. Next, let's look at how someone can become the best golfer in the world.
Find.
In case you were wondering how to become the top golfer, it's actually pretty simple. It's completely subjective, and the whole process doesn't involve any sort of voting or any committees whatsoever. The world ranking is just calculated by simple math. Instead of having individuals with different opinions vote for the best golfer, there's a formula. To determine who the world #1 in golf is, you have to divide the total number of points by the number of events played. In the end, whoever happens to have the best average among all the players who qualify become the top-ranked golfer, aka the world #1. Now you see how simple it is. Because of McIlroy's exceptional performance in the last tournament he played, he stole the spot from his competitor, edging him out. The formula is very simple, but that means that the ranking can change anytime the #1 is caught lacking, or even if the rest of the top golfers in the world do extremely well and exceed him. Moving on to the most dominant golfers of all time. You would be surprised to know that a lot of the best filers of all time have passed on. Most of the professional tour dates from the oldest tours, like the PGA Tour, date back to the 1930s, and if you're a relatively newer golf fanatic, you might not have even heard of them. Another thing about that period is that only 2 of the 4 majors right now were considered major championships back then. It's crazy to think about how things have changed since the beginning of professional golf. These 2 majors were the United States Amateur and the British Amateur. Without further ado, let's get into the list of the most dominant golfers since the advent of pro golf. First up, let's look at Henry Picard from the 30s. You can argue that he's the best golfer to play in the 1930s. He went on to win 2 majors during that decade, namely the 1938 Masters and the 1939 PGA Championship. What's crazy is that he ended the 1930s with a staggering total of 26 wins. When you think about this a little more though, it shows you just how much things have changed, considering that he only went to Britain for the Open Championship twice. Picard is one of those players who just loved golf, and you could see it in everything that he did. He was a head club professional during his playing days, but also long after they ended. He also wanted to teach people the game, both young and old. Moving on to Gene Sarazen. The 30s were a great year for for golf, it was taking off professionally. Sarazen is another one of the greats from this era. He's known as the Squire and was found between Bobby Jones and the iconic trio of Sam Snead, Ben Hogan, and Byron Nelson. He's probably most widely regarded for his double eagle on the 15th hole, which he made in the final round of the 1935 Masters. This was unforgettable, and he also ended up winning the next day in the 36-hole playoff in the tournament. Another thing that he is best known for is how amazingly accurate his iron play was. He won 4 majors just in the 1930s alone, and he became the first player to win what is now known as a career Grand Slam. He also won 22 times in what we now call the PGA Tour. Coming up, Byron Nelson. The 40s were a turbulent time. The whole decade was torn apart because of the Second World War, and Nelson was one of the 2 players that became the cream of the crop in professional golf. Lord Byron Nelson might just have the most unbreakable record in golf because he won 11 straight starts back on his 1945 tour. That's insane. He also won a staggering 41 times in 10 years and took full advantage of the war-wrecked fields in 1945, winning 18 times that year. The player also won 5 majors just between the years 1937 and 1945. These were 3 Masters and PGA Championships and a solo US Open in 1939. Next up, Arnold Palmer in the 1960s. Let's skip a few decades and get to Palmer, one of the greatest and most well-known golfers of all time. He was a player that had it all when he was playing.
How about that? Yeah, he just buries it.
A solid winning game and those Hollywood looks, along with a blue-collar appeal, he was the perfect gentleman. He won 43 times in the 60s and won some crazy 6 majors between 1960 and 64. As you can imagine, a man like him had many fans, and they call themselves Arnie's Army, and they surrounded themselves everywhere. Even on TV, people fell in love with him and his occasional cigarette flips. Golfers like Hogan, Snead, and Nelson weren't country club creatures when they were growing up. Palmer had that guy-next-door appeal. He formed the Big Three in 60s golf with Jack Nicklaus and Gary Player. He's still one of the most influential players ever. Now for Jack Nicklaus from the 70s. He was great in the 60s and won 31 times as a pro that decade, the first among the big names in golf to be successful for 2 decades back-to-back, and his second one ended up being more successful than the first. In the 70s, he won 37 times and 8 out of the 18 majors he played. Whoa, that's an insane number. After the 1978 Open Championship, he became the first player ever to have a career Grand Slam, not just in 1 but in 2 decades. Nicklaus was so dominant that he only missed 1 cut in a major out of the 40 that happened in the whole decade. He only missed the mark at the 1978 PGA Tour. Finally, Tiger Woods. These were just a few golfers who have dominated the rankings in the past. Woods is one of the most popular athletes not just of our time, but of all time. We mentioned his 281 week-long record of being the world #1 earlier in the video.
One more?
Hello.
One more.
He also holds the record for the most PGA Tour wins ever at 82 and is tied with Sam Snead for it. Tiger Woods is a living legend, and there's no denying that. That's a wrap for this video. What do you think about the current world #1 in golf? Which of the best players we talked about is your favorite? Let us know in the comments below. Make sure to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more videos like this. See you in the next one.